In this week's program, we're visiting with upland game supervisor Jesse Kolar to go over grouse and partridge populations. There is one change in the northeast that sharp-tailed grouse hunters need to be aware of, and we'll talk about fall hunting predictions for 2024. I'm Mike Anderson with the North Dakota Game and Fish Department.
This spring was pretty good. We had really good numbers for pheasants and sharptail. Because of the mild winter, our sharptail numbers were up, especially in the southwest, where they were up about 75% over the blocks that we survey in the southwest. That area had been lagging behind since the 2017 and 18 drought years, so it was good to finally see some up years and good news in that area. And the rest of the state, the statewide index for sharptail was up about 42%. So overall, we should have more adults in our population going into the year. So we won't finish our brood routes, our late summer roadside counts until the end of August, but we do run a report every year at the middle of the survey period, just because we know hunters are anxious to get that information. So we're just spitting that information out, but so far our brood numbers aren't quite as good as what they were last year. Still seeing broods out on the landscape, but the number of chicks per brood has been down for grouse and partridge, and slightly for pheasants as well. So that cold, wet June that we experienced was great for vegetation, great to get some grass growth and forb growth, but the birds, as they were hatching, both incubating and young chicks, probably suffered from some of that cold, wet weather. And the survey conditions have been fairly good, other than the last a week and a half that we had really hot, dry weather. Ideally, we want cool, wet mornings, cool, humid mornings. That's when the birds are forced to come to the gravel roads to be easily observed, so we can see those hens and their chicks, get accurate counts of them. So we've had some hot weather. Another condition that changes year to year is how much grass is in the ditches. So with that cool, wet weather we had in June, we also had really high vegetation in the ditches. So before those ditches are mowed, birds get a lot of cover to hide from us in. So maybe we'll see more during our second half of the survey season. We'll see what comes out of the grass. So we survey ruffed grouse similarly to pheasants, where we do a fixed route survey method. We have stops. Each observer gets out at a stop, listens for 5 minutes, and records how many ruffed grouse they hear, and then how many times they hear drumming during those 5 minutes. And at those stops year to year, we're able to compare and see whether the numbers are up or down year to year. The long-term trends for ruffed grouse, they historically were known as a cyclical bird that peaked every 10 years. We haven't seen those peaks as we used to see since 2003, but our numbers right now are short-term. We're at our short-term highs, especially in the Turtle Mountains. Minnesota also has done the same types of surveys in the spring, and they were seeing really high numbers this spring, so those look good. So we're seeing high partridge numbers right now. That's mainly driven by 3 to 5 years of really good reproduction. So during those brood surveys, we've been seeing averages of 8 to 10 chicks for every adult partridge this time of year. That's phenomenal production. This year we're a little bit lower than that, unfortunately, but those past years have accumulated to where we have a lot of partridge on the landscape. The first years we started seeing those increases was correlated with our 2017 and 18 drought periods. However, we've had wet years since then, and they've continued to do well. So I don't think it's quite as clean as drought or no drought, but our partridge are doing well. One suspected cause might be that grasshoppers tend to do better during a dry year. There's a fungus that normally limits grasshopper production, so potentially without that fungus, we've seen more grasshoppers and more partridge in the last 2 to 3 years. Our seasons will remain pretty similar. We're still going to have closed seasons for prairie chickens and sage grouse across the state. But the one big change this year is that there is a portion of the state, 2 portions of the state are currently closed to sharp-tailed grouse hunting. One portion is in the Cheyenne National Grasslands and the counties around there. That will remain closed. The other portion up by Grand Forks County, we are opening this year to sharp-tailed grouse hunting. So the prairie chickens there have declined quite a bit, and so we feel like it's okay to open that to sharp-tailed grouse hunters with minimal threat to the very few remaining prairie chickens in the area. It is important for hunters to know if they want to hunt that population, and the rest of the state for that matter, that prairie chickens do remain closed in the state. It's important for hunters to identify their game and know what their target is before they're shooting. A prairie chicken should look a lot darker than a sharp-tail when they flush. They don't have the white outer tail feathers that a sharp-tail would have, and then if you see them flying over, their bellies aren't going to be white like a sharp-tail. They're a much darker bird with a lot of horizontal black barring across the entire bird. They do look similar, so if hunters are uncertain of what they're aiming at, it's better not to shoot. And if you identify them afterward, you can try to reflush them and get another shot later. And each year it's important that hunters help us out. We ask hunters to voluntarily submit wings. We collect wings from sharp-tailed grouse, partridge, and pheasants, and use those to determine the ratio of juveniles to adults in the population. But then we're also looking at things like when the peak hatch was, so we can age every one of our juveniles that we get, back calculate from the date of harvest and figure out exactly which week that juvenile would have hatched. That's important for us when we're managing grasslands on our WMAs or making recommendations for other grasslands as far as when the best times for haying would be to avoid incidental harvesting of chicks. But yeah, overall our numbers, as I said, our reproduction wasn't as great as what we saw the last 2 or 3 years, especially for partridge and grouse. However, we're a little bit optimistic. Our spring numbers were so good. I think our total number of birds is probably going to be really similar to 2023. Also, our grouse are really difficult to detect on our reproductive surveys. They don't go to roads as faithfully as partridge or pheasants. So, optimistically, maybe we're missing some of our sharp-tailed grouse broods early in our survey period, and those might show up yet later, or what we'll see from hunter-submitted wings.